Yes, Bright, thank you so much for, again, getting involved in this conversation. Again, we've had many conversations so far in terms of the book and the different chapters. So this is chapters 7 and 8, the last myth, and I think probably one of the biggest, which is being the real man or the real man versus the true man. And so I guess before we get into it, good just to hear a bit about your background, where you grew up, what was life like?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here. So my name is Bright Ajura Kwarteng. I was born and raised in Stockwell some many decades ago. I won't go into the specifics, share my age. I grew up on a council estate, quite typical probably for most young boys on that side of town. Growing up in South London. I grew up in a 2-parent household. That was something that was quite unique. So having both my mum and dad around, again, I think gave me quite a unique exposure in terms of some of the things that I had to battle and some of the things I had to wrestle.
Sure.
Because I did have a father figure or some kind of form of a true man in front of me. But we'll dive in a little bit more. But that's kind of like a sort of a basis to the...
That's really helpful, and I think that point that you made there is key because, again, I grew up in a 2-parent household. Wasn't as close to my father as I am now, and as I hoped I had been when I look back. But a good point. So I think let's stay there. Like, given that you had a father in the house, what would you say drew you to the streets, and what was it on the streets? And again, being this real man, what was it? What were you actually seeking? What were you looking for?
Yeah, I think 2 levels. I think the first level is one of the things that maybe made me think outside was more attractive is the fact that there was the first generational parents coming from Ghana or Africa and not necessarily understanding the things of what goes on here in London. So I think on that first level, because there's a lack of understanding between parent and child not coming from the same space versus, like, for example, our children now, second, third generation onwards,
we get it. We understand.
There's that understanding. Yeah. So I think there was always that kind of pushback of home was just discipline. It was very harsh with dad. It was very... Look, I'm only going to give you £2 per day for pocket money, and that's even merit based on how that's what I'm saying. That's even based on how well I've done at school. Versus the second level, which was, I guess, the peer pressure going to secondary school, and I guess also learning that, oh, hang on a minute. Most people don't necessarily have a setup like me. They can get home whenever they want. They have a little bit more exposure to kind of hanging around with the elders on ends and things that I wasn't necessarily exposed to very early on.
Sure.
And I think it was a very, very slow, natural progression where I found that a little bit more enticing to kind of get involved in. And I think probably my main motivation was the £2 per day wasn't
sure.
It wasn't money. It wasn't money for me. So it was like, okay, I'm seeing how some of the other guys are making money. So how do I, get involved? And I think, it was probably more so from that.
Yeah. And what qualities, so when you were now kind of like outside the house, so you're outside, what were you seeing? What was, I guess, a real man put up to be? And what were you aspiring to become?
Yeah. So first of all, I'll talk about the real man, what I saw in the house. So my dad was very respectful amongst the Ghanaian community. So I saw a lot of people look up to him, respected, always gave, words of wisdom. And I think quite subconsciously, I kind of always looked up to that and I admired that subconsciously. Remember, I'm speaking from a 14, 15, 16-year-old boy now, fast forward and up being in sort of year 10, year 11.
Yeah.
So there was that aspect which was quite big in terms of seeing a real man and what a man should kind of look like, which I know a lot of my peers didn't have that kind of exposure. Now, what I saw outside in terms of the real man, and I think this is what shaped my identity a lot, is the fact of, I'll start off with money, because that was kind of like the main motivation.
Sure.
I saw guys, the elders on ends, having access to money in a way in which I've never really been exposed to. Remember, I'm coming from £2 per day. I'm in year 10, 15.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? That's triple M burger and chips is $1.99. So once that's done... what about my trainers?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and dad and mum ain't going JDs and
Yeah.
getting the shiny JD exclusives. They're
it.
taking you to E Street and trying to do a
Shoe
madness.
zone or
Shoe
something.
zone.
Yeah, we know it.
It's not happening. So going out there, and I remember seeing a lot of the oldest, they're making money. They're dressed in a certain way. There's a certain charisma about them. People are flocking around them.
Yeah.
It's quite attractive.
Yeah.
And again, quite inquisitive. I would say I was quite liked in the area, in the sense of just, I kind of spoke with everyone, I vibes with everyone, that kind of thing. So it's quite natural for me to kind of be not as close to some of the elders per se, but they knew who my dad was. Like, they'll be smoking in the blocks and my dad will kind of be telling them off and then be giving like a little lecture on top and this, that, and the other. So when they see me, it was always like, you know. But yeah, for me, that's what a real man looked like. That money aspect was a real serious driver of what a real man kind of looked like, and the respect they commanded as well.
I was going to say that, yeah. That's what it comes with it. Obviously, you got the money, you got the clothes, you got the people that come to you.
100.
But it's also that perception.
1,000,000%.
That people have of you in the ends, in the area. Your name's ringing bells.
100%. 100.
So where did that change come? And I guess, when did you, get introduced to the true man, Jesus Christ? And what change did that actually bring in your perception of what a man is meant to be?
Yeah, wow, that's a loaded question. So I'm going from 15, 16 now.
Yeah.
Just before I kind of hit on that question, I'm just thinking how to build in a picture I'm going from a place of, okay, £2 per day, hanging around with some of the elders. I used to spit, so that was my way of actually getting, I would say, maybe onto the road, quote unquote, of hanging around with the elders. They check for me, then dibble dabble kind of happens, and you know, and again, I was conflicted because I was the kind of guy where, all right, guys are carrying stuff, and I know I can't carry stuff to my house because my dad now is smelling me and like, do you know what I mean? Hey, what's that? Yeah. I'm like, oh, it's my friend. Take off your jacket. It's not gel off. So I'm conflicted at this point, but I would say that the real transformation for me, or at least I'll say the beginning, was 2004.
Okay.
The summer before I was going to college.
Okay.
Was when my sister came home and she was like, like, I'm found this like youth church that I started going to. And I was like, right, what's that? And to bring context, we wasn't necessarily, we were raised in a Christian household, more so from the perspective of my mum. Church of England, whether we went or not wasn't a big deal, but they tried. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But there was no real element of let's pray, let's this in the home. I would say that what was more prominent in the house was the Ghanaian culture. So my sister coming home talking about youth church and all of this, it was very, very new to me. Like, like young people and that going to church and whatever have you. Bearing in mind, I'm 16.
At the time.
Yeah, I'm 16, 04 summer. And that was probably like my first bit. And I remember I went with her one time and again, I'll say that was kind of like the beginning because as bad as it sounds, because of the kind of person I was and I used to spit and stuff like that, I tell like the guys from the ends, like it was no problem for me. Like, yo, you lot, like there's a youth church and there's girls there. So like,
that mindset,
let's kind of go there and, you know what I mean, and cause a bit of havoc. But I'd say that was probably like the first beginnings of like my sister coming home and saying, you know what, started going to this youth church, you should come and check it out. Yeah. So started slowly going, but probably went from all the wrong intentions, if I'm going to be honest. But yeah.
Sure. And so when did that change come where it's like, actually, I want to trust, I want to follow this man, Jesus Christ, and I want to model my life after his ways and my value system? Like, when did that come about? And in what ways did that change? Especially when you speak about money, I think that's interesting. Like, in what ways did that change?
Yeah, wow. I feel like it's still a transition, if I'm going to be very honest. But I think like when we're talking about powerful transition where I'm like, no, I'm making up my decision. So going from 04, muddied the waters because of college. So yes, there's this youth church and there's this idea of Christ, but then the pressure of 04, 05, 06 going to college, I feel like I've got a name for myself a little bit as well. But then I'm going into a college where there's girls, the guys who I'm hanging around with, there's money. There's now coming into the area a little bit of fighting. I wouldn't say that we were like road guys in a sense, but we were guys that were known, you know what I mean, to kind of hold our own. There was a little bit of a name.
Yeah.
So coming back to that point, I was conflicted. I always knew that it was kind of like, this is kind of the right thing, that seed that was sown in '04. But I think because of the pressure of, I felt good about myself.
Yeah.
I had a little bit of money behind me. I got my car.
Yeah.
But then I'm like, and then the pressure of college and girls and sex, you know.
Yeah.
I knew all of these, I knew all of these things were the right things. And I felt like that kind of held me back from making the right decision, that main transformation, big moment, although I kind of knew. And I feel like there's a lot of young boys who would probably be in that same space that I was.
Yeah.
You're not the baddest guy, but you know the seeds are sown and you know the right thing to do. But because of life pressures of certain things around you, making that big transformational step in that moment is really, really difficult. I remember even times in college, 17, being really open. I had never slept with a girl up until this point. Bearing in mind from about 14, 15, 16, growing up at the ends, the guys were doing the madness. And I remember standing and being in a conversation where they was talking about sex and they was talking about doing this, that and the other and da-da-da-da. And I remember it got to my turn now. Like, yo, like, you're gone. I'm sure like you're da-da-da-da. And I remember I kind of choked and I remember they kind of laughed because I remember I've been going to this youth church now and this idea of Christ is coming in.
Yeah.
And I remember I just felt so flustered. So imagine from that point, just because to save the image, I said, nobody's going to laugh at me again. I'm going to go out there and do my thing. And it just sent me down a really bad, just being in college doing the most. So coming on to that point of, okay, well, when is this transformation going to come? Yeah. I feel like, well, I'm in college now. I fast forward, I go to university. I feel like there's even a bit more steep. So I'm like, all right, I hear the idea of Christ. Yeah. And I kind of want to commit. Yeah. But then now I've gone into university and it's a whole, that the university that I've gone to as well is very similar to my college environment. Got it. Lots of people from my college went there. There's a little name for myself. People know who I am. We came with a little bit of money. People had student loan. We had student loan plus some. Yeah. So we could handle the inflation and do you know what I mean? That obviously brought a certain level of attention. Yeah. Girls in particular. Girls in particular. And just money and just being exposed to just, if I'm going to be honest, lots of really silly things. Again, it choked me from making that transformational decision, which maybe I could have made at 16. Sure. Now I'm moving to 18, 19, still struggling with that concept. Yeah. And I would really say this, just for anybody who has the opportunity to listen to this, is that, do you know what? Christ will receive you exactly where you are. That's right. Exactly where you are. Even when you feel like, well, I kind of got, and I can't go back. Yeah, you can, because the way how he transforms and he redeems is something which is beautiful. I can't even put into words. That's right. Just thinking back on my journey, it's like, you know what? Nah, young G, you don't have to muddy the waters until you feel you come to this perfect moment. Yeah. So 18, 19, 20, got the idea, seeds are sown, trying to make the transformational choice, but I just feel like I can't.
It's difficult.
And now I'm in my early 20s. So I've gone from 15 to 21, having that idea of trying to be transformed, knowing what's right. But because of now who I feel I'm becoming.
That's right, the image that you've got up.
The image. Yeah. How can I back out? So I'd say probably maybe I'm 21, I have a child now. Yeah. So that kind of changes the dynamic a bit. And I think that's, again, some ramifications of some decisions that I made.
Of course.
You know, earlier on. But I would say probably the transformational moment for me was, I'll probably say maybe around 22, 23.
Okay, what happened there?
Wow. Man, I just felt like at that point, my whole life was crumbling, if I'm going to be honest. Yeah. Secretly crumbling though. Because
Sure.
if you looked at me,
On the surface.
you would look and think, yeah, he's doing all right.
Yeah.
Remember, I've got a degree from uni. I've kind of got the best of both worlds. I've got a degree from uni. I'm doing corporate, but I'm still around a mandem where corporate plus some.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
With money, moves, little silly things, you know what it's like.
Yeah.
And I just wasn't fulfilled. I just wasn't. And at this point, also to provide some context, my parents had moved to Ghana.
Okay. So in your own.
I'm on my own, so I've come back from uni.
You're
I've had a
your own
child.
man.
I'm back on the house where I was born and raised by myself because my two older sisters have moved out. So now you can imagine, corporate got all of this going on. The man them are coming round. I've got this 3-bedroom flat to myself.
Yeah.
And I just wasn't fulfilled, man. I just wasn't fulfilled. And I remember at that point, just feeling so low and knowing that there was more.
Yeah.
And just reflecting back on all the seeds and all the kind of odd church going
Sure.
that I was attending, I needed more.
Yeah.
So I felt like I was really just on the floor, if I'm going to be honest. And I just felt like it was the perfect moment for Christ to be, I'm talking like fully floodgates to be introduced to me, where I was like, you know what, now let me pick up my word and pick up my Bible and start to really know about
Who he is.
who Christ is.
Yeah.
And I would say that the journey started from there, where we've kind of obviously continued to transition to this point.
Wow. So I guess even as we wrap it up, like tell me almost maybe three things about Christ that in that moment where, again, you were in your low, he came and met you, picked you up. Do you understand? No one else was there. No one else could go that deep, that far, do you know what I mean, to redeem you, to rescue you. What would you say, like, even as we close, 3 things that really stood out about the person of Christ and him being that true man and I guess something that you want to embody and that you're trying to embody even now?
Yeah. But the first thing I'd say is love. I think I knew a love like no other. I think while I was growing up, I had the idea of love and probably got this from films and maybe a little bit from like my parents.
Yeah.
But the idea that somebody can love you, die for your sins, everything that you've done, he's paid the price and you could start anew. That concept alone is just defines what a true man is, because that really breaks down the barriers of some of the things that we're taught.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
The second thing is that there's no real such thing as a status, because when you become like Christ and you're received by Christ, your identity becomes him. So the whole thing about status and feeling like you're somebody and you're important really diminishes.
Yeah.
And I think that really comes from that point of servant leadership. And I think there's an aspect in your book where he talks about, look how Christ, he was like, came from the Lord above, yet alone was still wash his disciples' feet.
That's
right. It
yeah.
does.
Yeah.
That's that image of a true man. Like, that's what it needs to look like. We are the foundation. Like, so that really kind of has really changed my outlook in terms of status and, you know, whatever have you. The third thing, I would say, he supplies my every need.
It's big.
He supplies my every need.
It's big.
Taking myself out of the construct.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is even a transition even for myself now. It's not me who does the providing, it's him. So even reversing and going back and thinking, right, £2 a day is peak. Well, I need to do more and more and more.
Yeah.
When you're in him,
and
it's like you need to test the word. Like, he does truly supply your every need.
That's right.
And I think remaining in that and being certain in that has really helped me, because it's even helping me today to transition into doing what he's called me to do, not necessarily in terms of what my money or qualifications is calling me to do. Because if I do that, then I miss the mark of, okay, where's my moment of when Jesus said to the disciples, you know what, leave everything and come and follow me. I feel like as Christians and as true Christ followers and as a true man, I have to have a moment of, you know, I'm dropping everything, my resources and my finances.
Yeah.
It may not look like that for everyone, but I'm dropping all of that. But let me turn around and follow Christ. Let me use my resources and my purpose and who I am to serve him. And I think that just breaks down the walls of everything that I've probably learned over the way that's had a seed, good or bad, from the olders, what money looks like and status, to now living a life where it's like, okay, those things don't really matter, and love and everything what I've just spoken about is like the bedrock. So
that's big. No, right. Thank you so much. I think like the vulnerability, but then also just the openness around, again, your journey, your transition from, again, seeking to be that real man. And I think that concept you shared about having your dad there as well is key. But then ultimately finding Christ, despite the journey, despite the difficulty, but where you're at now, to be able to say, do you know what? I want to live my life to follow him, and I think it's going to bless many. It's blessed me. So no, bro, thank you so much for being on this.
Absolutely, my pleasure, man. Serious.
Bless.